The rain started softly that Tuesday evening, just light drops against the window. Jake was sitting at his small kitchen table, papers spread everywhere. He taught evening classes at the community college, and grading essays was always the hardest part of his day. Students wrote about their dreams, their struggles, their hopes for better lives. Each paper told a story that mattered. His apartment was quiet except for the gentle tapping of rain. The old building had thin walls, so he could usually hear his neighbors coming home from work, cooking dinner or watching television. But tonight felt different. Everything seemed still, like the whole world was holding its breath. Jake pushed his glasses up and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been working for 3 hours straight. The coffee had gone cold and his back ached from leaning over the papers. Just as he stretched and thought about making another cup of coffee, he heard it, a soft knock at his door. Not the loud, confident knock of his neighbor asking to borrow something. Not the quick rap of a delivery person. This was gentle, almost hesitant, like someone wasn't sure they should be there at all. Jake looked at the clock on his phone. 9:15. Who would visit this late on a Tuesday? His friends usually called first, and his family lived 2 states away. He walked to the door, his socks sliding slightly on the wooden floor. Through the small peephole he saw her. Amy stood in the hallway, and Jake's heart jumped a little. They had worked together at the community center for almost 2 years, organizing events for local families. She helped with the children's reading program, while he ran the adult education workshops. They had become friends slowly, sharing coffee breaks and talking about books they both loved. But Amy had never come to his apartment before. They had never hung out outside of work. She kept her personal life private, always polite but never too personal. Jake respected that boundary, even though he sometimes wondered what she was really like when she wasn't being so careful with her words. Tonight, she looked completely different. Her usually perfect hair hung wet and messy around her face. Her white shirt was soaked through, and she clutched a small blue bag against her chest like it contained everything important in her world. Water dripped from her jacket onto the hallway carpet. But what struck Jake most was her face. Amy always wore this calm, controlled expression, like she had everything figured out. She smiled politely, spoke softly, and never let anyone see if something was bothering her. Now standing in his hallway, she looked lost. Jake opened the door quickly. "Amy, what happened? Are you okay?" She looked up at him with eyes that seemed bigger than usual. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, water dripping, holding that bag, looking at him like he was the only person in the world who might understand something important. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "I know it's late. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was different too. Usually Amy spoke with confidence, choosing her words carefully. Now she sounded small, uncertain, like a child who had gotten lost and finally found someone familiar. "Don't apologize," Jake said, stepping aside. "Come in, you're soaking wet." Amy stepped into his apartment, and Jake noticed how she moved. Usually she walked with purpose, always knowing exactly where she was going and what she needed to do. Tonight, she moved slowly, looking around his living room like she was seeing it for the first time. His apartment wasn't much. A small couch he had bought used, a coffee table covered with books, a lamp his sister had given him when he first moved out on his own. The walls had a few pictures he had taken during weekend walks around the city. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Amy set her bag down by the door but kept her wet jacket on. She stood in the middle of his living room, arms wrapped around herself, looking at the floor. "The bathroom is right down the hall if you want to dry off," Jake offered. "I can make some tea or coffee or—" "Thank you," she said, but she didn't move toward the bathroom. Instead, she looked up at him again with that same expression that made his chest tight with worry. Jake had seen that look before, but never on Amy's face. It was the look people got when they had been carrying something heavy for too long, and finally found someone who might help them set it down. It was vulnerability mixed with hope and fear all at once. "Amy," he said gently. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" She opened her mouth like she was going to answer, then closed it again. Jake could see her thinking, trying to decide how much to say, how much to trust him with. They had talked about many things during their coffee breaks at work, but always safe topics. Books, movies, funny things that happened during the programs they ran, never anything too personal. The rain got heavier outside, drumming against the windows. Amy shivered slightly in her wet clothes. "Let me get you something dry to wear," Jake said. "We can talk after you're warm." He went to his bedroom and found an old college sweatshirt and some comfortable pants. When he came back to the living room, Amy was still standing in the same spot, but now she was looking at the pictures on his walls. Photos of sunsets, city streets, people reading in the park. "You took these?" she asked. "Yeah, just for fun. Photography helps me think." She nodded, still studying the pictures. "They're beautiful. You see things differently than most people." There was something in the way she said it that made Jake think she wasn't just talking about photography, but before he could ask what she meant, Amy took the clothes from his hands. "I'll just change quickly," she said, heading toward the bathroom. While she was gone, Jake cleaned up the papers from his kitchen table and put the kettle on for tea. He straightened the couch cushions and wondered what could have brought Amy to his door on a rainy Tuesday night. In all the time he had known her, she had never seemed like someone who needed help. She was always helping others, always in control, always calm. When Amy came out of the bathroom, she looked smaller somehow in his oversized clothes. Her hair was still damp, but she had combed it back from her face. She had washed away whatever makeup she had been wearing, and without it she looked younger, more real. She sat down on his couch, tucking her feet under her like a cat finding a warm spot. Jake brought over 2 cups of tea and sat in the chair across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to show he was listening. "Better?" he asked. Amy wrapped her hands around the warm cup and nodded, but Jake could see she was still carrying whatever had brought her here. It was in the way her shoulders stayed tense and how she kept looking at him like she was trying to decide whether she could trust him with something important. The rain continued outside, and Jake waited. Sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was just be there, ready to listen when they were ready to talk. Amy sat on Jake's couch for a long time, just holding her teacup. The steam rose up between them like a thin curtain, and Jake watched her face change as she thought about whatever had brought her here. He had never seen her like this before, so quiet, so uncertain. At work, Amy was always the one with answers. When parents had questions about the reading program, she knew exactly what to say. When kids got upset or scared, she could calm them down with just a smile and a few kind words. She moved through the community center like she belonged there, like she had everything under control. But now, sitting in his living room wearing his old college sweatshirt, she looked like someone who had lost her way. Jake sipped his tea and waited. He had learned from teaching that sometimes people needed silence before they could find their words. Rushing them never helped. So he sat quietly, listening to the rain outside and watching Amy's face in the soft light from his lamp. Finally, Amy set down her cup and looked around his apartment again. She studied the books on his coffee table, the small plant by the window, the blanket his mother had made for him folded over the back of his chair. Her eyes took in every detail like she was trying to memorize this moment. "You know," she said softly, "I've never been in anyone's home like this before." Jake raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Amy paused, searching for the right words. "I've been to dinner parties, work events, family gatherings, but I've never just shown up at someone's door because I needed help." She stood up then, and Jake watched as she walked to the center of his small living room. The oversized sweatshirt hung loose on her frame, and she pushed the sleeves up to her elbows like she was getting ready to do something important. "I always have everything planned out," Amy continued, her voice getting stronger. "What I'm going to say, how I'm going to act, what people expect from me. I practice conversations in my head before I have them. I choose my clothes carefully, so I look professional but not too serious, friendly but not too casual." Jake nodded slowly. He had noticed this about Amy at work, how she always seemed to know exactly the right thing to do or say. He had admired it, actually. He sometimes felt awkward in social situations, but Amy never did. "Tonight," Amy said, and Jake could see her hands starting to shake slightly. "I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend I had it all figured out." She started taking off the wet jacket she had been clutching since she arrived. As she hung it carefully over the back of his chair, Jake realized this simple action felt significant somehow. She was making herself more comfortable, letting down one small guard. Then she sat back down, but this time she faced him directly instead of looking away. "Do you ever feel like you're wearing a costume?" she asked. "Like the person everyone sees isn't really you?" Jake thought about this. Sometimes, especially when I first started teaching, I felt like I was pretending to be someone who knew what he was doing. "That's exactly it," Amy said, and for the first time since she arrived, she almost smiled. "Except I've been pretending for so long, I'm not sure I remember who I really am underneath it all." The rain outside was getting heavier, drumming steadily against the windows. It made Jake's small apartment feel even more cozy and safe, like they were in their own little world where Amy could say things she had never said before. "What happened today?" Jake asked gently. Amy looked down at her hands. "My husband asked me a question, a simple question. He said, 'Amy, what do you actually want to do this weekend?' And I realized I had no idea. I've spent 15 years of marriage asking him what he wanted to do, or suggesting things I thought he would like, or choosing activities that would make us look like the perfect couple to our friends." She took a deep breath. "When he asked me what I wanted, I just stared at him. I couldn't answer. And then he looked at me with this sad expression and said, 'Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a very nice stranger.'" Jake felt his heart hurt for her. He could see how much those words had shaken her. "So I came here," Amy continued, "because you're the only person who has ever asked me what I really think about things. Remember last month when we were planning the book fair? You asked me which books I actually enjoyed reading, not which ones I thought would be good for the event. And I told you about those mystery novels I read late at night when no one was watching." Jake did remember. Amy had blushed when she admitted she loved detective stories and crime thrillers. She had seemed embarrassed, like enjoying exciting books was something she shouldn't admit. "I felt more like myself in that 5-minute conversation than I had in months," Amy said. "And tonight when I felt like I was disappearing completely, I thought of you." She gave him a look then that Jake had never seen before. Not the polite professional smile she wore at work. Not the careful expression she used when talking to parents or volunteers. This look was raw and real and a little scared. It was the look of someone who had just jumped off a cliff and wasn't sure if anyone would catch them. "I don't know how to be myself," she whispered. "I've forgotten how." Jake felt the weight of Amy's words settle between them. The rain continued outside, but inside his apartment everything felt very still and important. He could see that sharing this much had taken courage, and he didn't want to say the wrong thing. "You know," he said carefully, "I think you've been more yourself tonight than you realize." Amy looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well, you showed up here without calling first. You didn't apologize for bothering me or make excuses for why you came. You just said you didn't know where else to go." That was honest. Amy considered this. "I guess you're right. I usually plan every social interaction. And you're sitting here in my old sweatshirt with no makeup telling me things you've never told anyone else. That seems pretty real to me." For the first time since she arrived, Amy laughed. It was a small laugh, but genuine. "I must look terrible." "You look like yourself," Jake said simply. They sat quietly for a moment, both thinking. Jake refilled their teacups and noticed that Amy seemed less tense now, like some invisible weight had shifted off her shoulders. "Tell me more about your husband," Jake said. "How long have you two been struggling with this?" Amy sighed and curled up deeper into the couch. "Honestly, probably years. But we're both so polite, so careful not to rock the boat, that we never talked about it. We have these pleasant conversations about work and schedules and weekend plans. We go to dinner with other couples and everyone thinks we're perfect together." She paused, staring at her tea. "But we never talk about dreams or fears or what makes us laugh when no one is watching. We never disagree about anything because I always just go along with whatever he wants, and now I think he's as tired of that as I am." Jake nodded. He had been in relationships like that before, where everything looked fine on the surface but felt empty underneath. "What did you do after he said that?" Jake asked. "I went to our bedroom and just sat there for an hour," Amy said. "I looked around at all our things. The matching furniture we bought together, the wedding photos, the vacation pictures where we're both smiling perfectly for the camera. And I realized I couldn't point to one single thing that was truly mine. Everything in our house reflects what I thought a good wife should choose." Jake could hear the pain in her voice, but also something else. Relief, maybe. Like she was finally admitting something she had been avoiding for a long time. I packed a small bag, Amy continued, and told him I needed to think. He didn't try to stop me. I think he was relieved too. We've both been pretending for so long that we forgot we were pretending. Where will you stay tonight? Jake asked. I got a room at that little hotel downtown. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Amy smiled slightly. I chose the room myself based on what I wanted, not what would impress anyone or what was the most practical choice. Jake found himself smiling too. How did that feel? Scary, Amy admitted, but also kind of exciting. Like maybe I can learn to make decisions for myself again. They talked through the night as the rain slowly stopped, and the first hints of dawn began to show through Jake's windows. Amy told him about her childhood, how she had learned early that being agreeable and helpful made adults happy. She had carried that lesson into every relationship since then. Jake shared his own stories about times he had felt lost or uncertain. He told her about quitting his first job because it made him miserable, even though everyone said he was crazy to leave such a secure position. You're brave, Amy said as the sun started to rise. You've always been willing to be yourself even when it's difficult. So are you, Jake replied. You're here, aren't you? You're doing the hardest thing anyone can do. You're choosing to be real instead of safe. Amy looked out the window at the morning light and Jake saw something change in her face. The scared, lost expression was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Determination, maybe, or hope. I need to go back and really talk to my husband, she said. Not the polite, careful conversation we usually have. A real one about what we both actually want. Jake nodded. That sounds like a good place to start. As Amy gathered her things to leave, she turned to Jake with that same direct, honest look she had given him the night before. Thank you, she said. Not just for letting me stay, but for seeing me. Really seeing me, not just the version I usually show everyone. And Jake realized that in helping Amy find herself, he had learned something too. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is simply witness them being brave. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy night when Amy showed up at Jake's door. 3 weeks of difficult conversations, sleepless nights, and slowly learning to be honest about what she really wanted from life. Jake hadn't heard from Amy since that morning when she left his apartment to face her marriage. He respected her space, knowing she needed time to figure things out on her own. But he thought about her often, wondering how she was handling everything. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, his phone buzzed with a text message. Would you like to meet for coffee? I have something to tell you. Amy. An hour later, Jake sat in their usual coffee shop near the community center, watching the door and wondering what Amy wanted to share. When she walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. The Amy he knew always dressed carefully. Professional clothes, perfectly styled hair, makeup that looked natural but took effort. This Amy wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail and she had no makeup on at all. She looked tired but somehow more alive than he had ever seen her. Hi, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Her voice was different too. Less careful, more natural. Hi yourself, Jake replied, studying her face. How are you doing? Amy smiled, and it was the first completely genuine smile he had ever seen from her. I'm getting divorced, she said. Jake felt his stomach drop. Amy, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Actually, Amy said, still smiling, I'm better than okay. It was the right decision for both of us. She told him about the conversation she had with her husband when she returned home that morning 3 weeks ago. For the first time in their 15-year marriage, they had talked honestly about their relationship. I told him everything, Amy said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. About feeling like I didn't know who I was anymore. About how I had spent years trying to be the perfect wife instead of being myself. About how lonely I felt even when we were together. Jake leaned forward. How did he take it? He cried, Amy said softly. He told me he had been feeling the same way. He said he loved me, but he wasn't sure he knew me well enough to be in love with me anymore. And I realized I felt the exact same way about him. Amy explained how they had spent the next 2 weeks talking like they never had before. They shared their real thoughts, their disappointments, their dreams they had never admitted to each other. It was painful, but also healing. We both realized we had been living like roommates who were very polite to each other. Amy continued. We never fought because I always gave in. We never had passionate discussions about anything because I was too afraid to disagree with him. We were safe together, but we weren't really living. Jake nodded, understanding. That must have been hard to admit. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Amy said. But also the most honest. And you know what's strange? Even though we're getting divorced, we're better friends now than we've been in years. Amy told Jake about how she had moved into her own small apartment the week before. It was nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place with old hardwood floors and windows that let in lots of light. But it was hers. I went furniture shopping for the first time in my adult life, Amy said, and Jake could hear the excitement in her voice. I picked out a couch because I liked the color, not because it matched everything else. I bought books I actually wanted to read and put them where I could see them. I hung pictures on the walls that made me happy. Jake found himself smiling. It sounds amazing. It is, Amy said. But the best part happened yesterday morning. She told him about standing in her bathroom getting ready for work. She looked in the mirror and realized she didn't recognize the person looking back at her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like herself for the first time in years. I wasn't trying to look like what I thought a professional woman should look like, or what a good wife should look like, Amy explained. I was just looking like me. And I thought, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you. Jake felt a warmth spread through his chest. That's beautiful, Amy. I called in sick to work, she continued, laughing at herself. I spent the whole day just being in my apartment. I made myself breakfast and ate it slowly. I read a book just because I enjoyed it. I took a long bath in the middle of the afternoon. I ordered pizza for dinner and ate it straight from the box while watching a movie I had always wanted to see but never had because my husband didn't like comedies. Jake could see how these simple acts of choice had meant everything to her. How does it feel? Scary, Amy admitted. But also incredible. Like I'm finally awake after sleeping for 15 years. They talked for 2 more hours and Jake watched Amy's face light up as she described her new life. She told him about calling her sister for the first time in months. Not to give updates about her marriage or ask about family events, but just to talk. She had joined a book club where people actually discussed what they thought about the stories, instead of just saying nice things. She had started taking photography classes on weekends. I remember now why I used to love taking pictures, Amy said. I had forgotten about that completely. As they got ready to leave the coffee shop, Amy grabbed Jake's hand across the table. I need to tell you something, she said, looking directly into his eyes with that same honest expression she had given him that rainy night. You saved my life. Jake started to protest, but Amy shook her head. Not in a dramatic way, she said. But you showed me what it looked like to be comfortable with yourself. You listened to me without trying to fix me or tell me what to do. You saw something real in me when I had forgotten it was there. Jake squeezed her hand gently. You saved yourself, Amy. You were brave enough to change. Maybe, Amy said. But I couldn't have done it without knowing that at least one person would still like me if I stopped pretending to be perfect. As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Jake realized that Amy had taught him something too. Watching her find the courage to be herself had reminded him how precious and rare authentic connections really were. 6 months later, Jake knocked on the door of Amy's apartment, holding a bottle of wine and wondering what her place would look like. She had invited him for dinner, the first time she had cooked for anyone since moving out on her own. When Amy opened the door, Jake was struck again by how different she seemed. Not just her appearance, though she did look more relaxed and confident. It was something deeper. She moved through the world now like someone who belonged in her own life. Come in, Amy said, stepping aside with a genuine smile. I hope you're hungry. I may have made too much food. Jake looked around her apartment and smiled. It was exactly what he had imagined. The couch was a warm green color that made the room feel cozy. Books were stacked everywhere, on shelves, on the coffee table, beside her bed in the next room. Photographs covered one wall, some that Amy had taken in her weekend classes, others that were clearly meaningful memories. Amy, this place is perfect, Jake said. It's mine, she replied simply, and Jake could hear how much that meant to her. Over dinner, Amy told Jake about her new job. She had left the community center to work at a small nonprofit that helped adults learn to read. The pay was less, but the work felt more meaningful to her. I'm actually using skills I didn't know I had, Amy explained, serving them both homemade pasta that smelled incredible. Remember how I always let other people make decisions? Well, it turns out that when I actually share my ideas, they're pretty good ones. Jake laughed. I'm not surprised at all. Amy told him about her ex-husband who had also made changes in his life. He had started dating someone new, a woman who shared his love of hiking and outdoor adventures, something Amy had never enjoyed but had pretended to for years. "We had lunch together last week," Amy said. "It was nice. We can actually be friends now because we're both being honest about who we are." As they ate, Jake noticed how Amy moved around her kitchen with confidence. She didn't apologize for anything being imperfect. She didn't worry about whether he was enjoying the meal or having a good time. She was just present, enjoying their conversation and the food she had made. "This pasta is amazing," Jake said. "Where did you learn to make it?" "I've always known how to cook," Amy replied. "I just never cooked what I actually wanted to eat. I was always trying to make things my husband would like, or things that looked impressive for dinner parties. This is my grandmother's recipe. I used to help her make it when I was little." After dinner, they sat on Amy's couch with glasses of wine, and she showed Jake photos from her recent trip to visit her sister. "Look at this one," Amy said, pointing to a picture of herself laughing on a beach. "My sister took this when I wasn't paying attention. I look so happy." Jake studied the photo. Amy's hair was messy from the wind. She had no makeup on, and she was laughing at something off camera. She looked completely free. "You do look happy," he agreed. "Really happy?" "I am," Amy said. "For the first time in years, I wake up excited about my day. Not every day is perfect, but they're my days, you know? My choices, my mistakes, my successes." As the evening went on, Jake realized that their friendship had evolved too. The careful politeness that had defined their relationship at work was gone. Amy asked him direct questions about his life, shared her honest opinions about things, even disagreed with him about a movie they had both seen. "You know," Jake said as they cleaned up the dishes together, "I like this version of you even better than the one I thought I knew before." Amy paused in drying a plate and looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The Amy I knew at work was nice, but she always felt a little distant. Like there was a wall there that I couldn't get past. This Amy, the real Amy, is more interesting. You have strong opinions, you tell funny stories, you're not afraid to be yourself around me." Amy smiled and bumped his shoulder playfully. "Well, you're stuck with the real me now. I don't know how to go back to pretending, and I don't want to." As Jake was getting ready to leave, Amy walked him to the door and gave him a hug. Another thing the old Amy would never have done so naturally. "Thank you for dinner," Jake said, "and for everything else." "Thank you for being patient with me while I figured out who I was," Amy replied. Jake looked at his friend, this woman who had found the courage to completely rebuild her life, and felt proud of how far she had come. "You know what I think?" he said. "What?" "I think you're going to be just fine." Amy grinned, and Jake could see that she believed it too. As he walked back to his car, he heard Amy close her door behind him, not shutting him out, but settling into her own space, her own life, her own choices. And for the first time in all the years he had known her, Jake was certain that Amy was exactly where she was supposed to be.